unprecedented for somebody who is losing to begin to use other tactics to defend his position. And it strengthened that perception that Trump is about Trump, not anybody else. And that's why
Exactly.
people are ready to get rid of him from the White House.
Mm.
They don't think he's a character who needs another 4 years in the White House.
Professor, just looking in the United States of America and claiming to be the democracy in the world. And when one looks at what happens at a time like this, particularly at election time, and looking at all the issues, the shenanigans that are playing out in the background, and often the United States is very quick to point fingers at the rest of the world, and particularly at us here in Africa, looking at Africa as third world. And when we see an election of this nature, and when we see all the issues that are playing out, what does it actually say for a country that boasts to be the upholder of democracy in the world?
There are clear double standards when it comes to how the U.S. looked at the rest of the world, particularly in places like Africa. I think over the years, they have been preaching about democratization, good governance in Africa, while I think concealing the kinds of issues that we are now seeing, that in fact the American system can also at some point produce leaders who may even be a threat to the very institutions that they have always been talking about. So that's one part of the story, that the double standards have always been there, the preaching has always been there. But what I like about what is happening there is that because you remember that people expected violence on election day. People expected that things would be crumbling, particularly during the election. Even people boarding up their businesses and so on, which was very, very, very grave because everybody wasn't sure whether, in fact, the U.S. can now run an election without violence. But I think what we saw on that day is that the elections went very well. There was limited, almost zero violence until I think till now. So it also shows that I think that system has been a resilient system in the sense that there are institutions in place that are strong enough, they can weather all these kinds of storms. The problem with the U.S. is that you have 50 states that have different systems of election. So there is no uniformity. So that's why very different states have very different rules. And therefore, when it comes to very close elections like this, you run into problems because, there are some states, for instance, that counted the mail ballots were counted before the actual elections, before the votes. And now there are some states that can only count at the very end. So we are now on this nail biter because it's so close. And what is being counted in the larger places like Arizona and Georgia are mail ballots, and Pennsylvania, mail ballots that could only be counted at the very end by different state laws. So it's very confusing. And that confusion is what makes people really begin to wonder, what kind of system is this? Because we are used to some uniform systems of elections across the world, not this kind of patchy, very different systems that create confusion. And then also the electoral college is also more confusing because a lot of people wonder why would, for instance, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but she lost the electoral college.
Yes.
But it's the uniqueness of that system that the electoral colleges are determined by the votes. The votes are determined by how big the state is, how many people there are, and so on and so forth.
Well, we're certainly looking at the outcome with interest, Professor Gilbert. But for now, thank you very much for your time with us on News and Views on Salam Media. We wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Professor Gilbert Khadiagala joining us this morning, and we come back. We will still be staying with the American elections, unpacking where we are at this point in time And we'll be joined by Francis Cornegay, a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Social Dialogue.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal's Breakfast Club aim to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend the day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner by visiting our website on www.pennyappeal.org.za